Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our chat with Ray Gagnon on looking to the future. This is really our crystal ball session because we are going to be looking at the future and trying to imagine what the future could actually be like. And I'm lucky enough to have this conversation with Ray Gagnon. Ray Gagnon and I go back a long way because we overlapped in the State House when I was there between 2008 and 2014, and we worked on a number of bills that had to do with renewables and energy efficiency and the environment and all those things that I care so much about, and so does Ray. So I'm going to let Ray introduce himself. He's now running for the position of County Commissioner as a write-in for Sullivan County, and I'll let him tell you a little more about what he's running on and what he's running for. And after that, we'll move straight into our crystal ball session, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Well, hello, how are you? And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me and that glorious introduction. Crystal balls and looking to the future, that's the best thing that we can focus on. To be honest with you, I've been engaged in local politics, state politics, and even national politics most of my adult life. Started out as a Claremont City Councilman, worked into being the mayor, and then from there, actually I was a presidentially appointed U.S. Marshal for New Hampshire during the Clinton years. President Clinton appointed me, and then I, from there, actually started working with a group of other people dealing as a loose consortium in community development and looking at how we could better improve the communities here and certainly in Western New Hampshire, but all over the state. So the idea of a crystal ball and looking to the future, to me, is something that's very exciting. And it's something that I think that is most needed. Since March, we've been dealing with the pandemic. We've been out of the normal routine, so to speak. And as we become more and more safer, and hopefully vaccine is developed and we're sort of over this hurdle, the steps that are going to take for getting us back to normal are going to need a lot of creative and thinking that is out of the box and that is crystal ball oriented. So thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, if after listening to Ray, you think that you know Ray, you don't, because he's told you about his past. But this conversation here is about the future. And the future for Ray starts with his run for county commissioner. And if you want to know what the future looks like a little bit, aside from the session we're going to have now, you should go into his Facebook page at Ray Gagnon for County Commissioner. And there you'll find more details about that vision that we're going to be touching on while we have this conversation. Well, while you listen to us, you may have the feeling that, maybe we're being, crystal ball-like, meaning we're being utopian. And utopia tends to get a bad rap because people usually think of utopia as impossible dreams. But that's not what utopias are. There is someone who said it very well. And that person said, and I won't tell you the name, said, the utopias of today are the truths of tomorrow. And the truth is that utopias drive historical change. And that's why it is important to do the exercise of imagining what a better future can look like, not in very vague terms or in fantasy terms, but in concrete terms. And that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to be talking about different issues that are really important for all of us at this point. And we're going to connect that to this idea that Biden has, explained and developed in his campaign, which is the idea of not just building back, but building back better. That's what we're thinking about. How do we build back better? What is it that we want? What do we want, for instance, education to look like? We can start with education, for instance. Okay, we know that there are a lot of problems with education in the state of New Hampshire. So now we have the possibility of really changing things around, because any crisis is also a window of opportunity. And we need to grab that window of opportunity and really push for real change. And what would real change look like if we're thinking about education? Think about that. And we'll think about it with you. Ray.
Well, no, you're right, exactly. And I really kind of am convinced that with the with how do I explain this? With a Biden administration, with a new administration, with a national approach that comes up with a national plan, then it's all the more important that we have people in positions in state senates and in county executive commissioner offices around the country who are prepared to use their creative juices in crafting solutions to problems. When we're talking about education, we're talking about training individuals for jobs that in some respect don't exist yet, or have suffered greatly and may not ever jump back to the numbers that they once were. So what we need to do is be very creative in thinking about how we're going to train this workforce and develop those skills that they will need to grow and to develop families and raise families and prosperity.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting because in speaking about education, Ray, you've used two words that are critical tools for, forward vision or for utopian vision. You've talked about creative thinking and you've said out of the box. And the combination of creative thinking and out of the box, that's what allows you to take that leap forward. And if we talk about education, of course, we know what the problems with funding are. And we know that we have to radically review the funding mechanism that is being used in New Hampshire to fund education. That we know. But in addition to that, in addition to ensuring that we give every child in the state an equitable education, a high quality education, in addition to that, we have to think creatively and out of the box. You're talking about new jobs. You're talking about new forms of training. That means that our college network has to be strengthened. It means that the vocational schools have to be strengthened. And it means that the cost of college has to go way down so that our young people can afford to go to college and get trained for the new jobs and create the new labor force right here within the state of New Hampshire. So all those things come together in that vision of what education needs to look like in the future. If we do build better, not just about, providing adequate funding K to 12. It's that, and it's beyond that. Because beyond that, we want to make sure that those young people get the training that they need to fill those new jobs, and that they get this training in the state, and that they stay in the state and become productive in the state, right?
Exactly, Beatriz. And, I was saying that how, so focusing this as a post-pandemic era and how we need to look at it from that perspective. But in the southern district of Senate District 5, which is Claremont and parts of Cornish and Charlestown, we've been having some problems and we've been having some challenges for 20, 30 years. I mean, ever since the manufacturing jobs that were on both sides of the Connecticut River, whether it was Jones and Lamson over in Springfield that employed folks in Charlestown, or it was Droy and Goodyear and manufacturers here in the Claremont and Windsor area, those jobs are long gone, and we've never adequately recovered from those jobs. So what we need to do is to be smarter, and we need to be thinking what can we do that will not only enhance their chances for gainful employment and a successful career, but also as an economic development tool to bring new people here into the area. Without new people, we're going to become stagnant. And I think that's another piece that has to be addressed. And in education, you're not going to move if you don't have a good education system. You're not going, if you're a 35-year-old dad and mom with a couple of kids, you're going to want to go where there's the best education system available. And we need to be prepared for that. That's a key economic development tool.
Yep, it really is, because one can think of education just as, the nurturing of the mind and development of skills and so on. But it goes well beyond that. It's so closely tied to economic development, because just as you said, when people move from one area to another, the first thing they look at is the schools for the kids. And that's bottom line. And if the schools are good, they move there. That's not just true within our district. It's true within the cities. When people look for a place to live in a city, the first thing they look at is the schools. What schools are there in a particular neighborhood or in another one? So the schools are crucial for the development of our people here, but they're also crucial in order to attract people from the outside. And that's again, thinking about the future, that's something that becomes extremely important. How to attract new businesses, how to attract investors, how to attract the kind of economic power that fuels an economic recovery. You said it, when manufacturing quit, this whole southern area was in trouble. But it's in trouble because we need to attract new capital and new businesses to replace what manufacturing did until 1970. And how do we do that? I mean, education is one tool, obviously, for economic recovery and for economic growth. But there are other tools, and one of the most obvious at this point in time is, of course, broadband. And when you say broadband, you're really talking about communications, and we can expand that a little more. But broadband is absolutely critical. It was critical 10 years ago, but people didn't realize it. People thought at the time that it was like a luxury. No, people don't need broadband. They don't need to be watching videos, because that was the idea, that you wanted broadband because you wanted to download Netflix videos and so on. No. Now everybody realizes that it is critical. It's critical to health. It's critical to education. It's critical to business. It's critical to the entire workforce. That's what we see now. So that is something that we need to work on, right?
Exactly. We are in a situation right now where so many people are working from home, and it's important that they have access to technology and to broadband connectivity. If they don't, then they're not going to be able to work from home. Therefore, they're not going to be employed. And there are some experts that are talking about that in a post-pandemic world, in a post-COVID world, the idea of people working from home and working remotely is going to continue. So we have to be conscious of that, and we have to be prepared. Now, I have a few friends in the world of real estate who are telling me that they are selling properties here in western New Hampshire, that sight unseen. People are just looking online and buying property, and they're selling them. Now, those folks are going to require and demand adequate connectivity. It's a done deal. It's not something that's going to be negotiated and they can change their mind. A few months ago, I do a weekly radio show in Newport with Steve Smith, and Steve lives up in the small town of Goshen. And the three of us zoomed in, and we had our show, and it was very high tech, and I was very, very excited about this. But one of the things that he was telling me is that his daughter, who's a young high school girl, they have terrible internet. They have no connectivity because it's that Western Highlands, that rim from Jaffrey and a little east of Keene that comes all the way up through New Hampshire, right up until the White Mountains. And there's just forget it. You don't have any internet. So he was bringing his daughter to work with him, and she was excelling. I mean, the idea of remote learning and being able to do research and not having a 20 or 30 minute block of time, she was excelling, as she did excel, and she really enjoyed this. Now, he's telling me if they could have this at home, she would obviously not have to get up at 5 a.m. and drive down with her dad to Newport, New Hampshire, just to plug in her computer. But that's the kind of stuff that people are not thinking of. And we have to be prepared to put together those pieces to make that happen. Julia Griffin at the town of Hanover she's been leading the charge for this for a long, long time. So we have some experts. We have some people that know what is needed.
We do. And some progress has been made this year because the Senate has passed a couple broadband bills that are, already opening up new possibilities for broadband expansion. But there's going to be more than that, because one of the things that's happening is that the broadband expansion is one of the items at the top of the Biden agenda. And that includes not just, being supportive. It means putting out a lot of money for broadband expansion. I mean, doing something like the equivalent of the Rural Electrification Act, which was federal fuel, and then it was implemented throughout the nation because it was recognized to be a major necessity. I think that at this point, broadband is an equivalent necessity, and I think that there is going to be money there. And I think that we need to be sure that we are ready for the money and that we have all the legislative, grid in place to take full advantage of whatever money can come from there, because it impacts every aspect of our lives. I agree with you. I mean, crystal ball and all. I think that somehow things are not going to be the same after this COVID in terms of people, going to their office so many days a week or working in their office 8 to 5. I think that there's going to be a lot more flexibility, and that is good because that's going to make life, I think, better for people who used to just commute every day and so on. It's going to bring down the emissions of transportation. So it's going to have a lot of positive effects, but the connectivity is essential. Broadband has to be in place. So I think that that to me, it was a priority 10 years ago, and now it's an urgent priority. It's one of the first things we have to do, not just make it happen, but make it happen fast, because make it happen in 3 years, in 5 years, that's not good enough. It has to be done right now. So we have to get the wheels turning right away. And that's what we're planning to do.
Yeah. The impact is so broad. It's the internet, it's broadband, it's connectivity, it's technology, but the benefits of that is a ripple effect. It's going to help interpersonal relationships. It's going to help parents working with their children. It's going to increase the activity and the role between a parent and a child. We're going to then have healthier, happier children, and tired, more exhausted parents, but that's okay. It's a well-rounded plan, and it is the future, and we need to be prepared for that. We need to be able to compete with the bigger urban areas.
Absolutely, we really do, and we need to be able to compete with the southwestern areas of the state as well, and we need to be able to attract people from those areas. That's the other thing. And if we have the proper, communications network, we will. But talking about communication, I mean, broadband is very important. But what about transportation? What about transportation within the district? I mean,
the idea of public transportation in particular.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
We here in Sullivan County, we a few years ago, our transportation provider just bellied up and just couldn't do it anymore. So we approached Southwest Community Services, which is a community action agency. It's a poor people's program. We approached them to see about creating or taking on the job of community transportation, and we really stressed that yes, their population that they're serving are people who are, do not have wealth, do not have access to their own vehicles, need public transportation, so forth. But what we really wanted them to do was to think of how to make transportation, public transportation, not just something for poor people, but for the entire community and population. One of the things we found is that there are 150 individuals working the first shift at Hypertherm up in Hanover, from Claremont and Charlestown. 150 first shift. Now, Hypertherm is one of those wonderful companies that has some very proactive, forward-thinking leaders. And they actually will give their employees benefits and monetary benefits if they do things like carpool or take public transportation or think of outside the box, and rather than just having one person driving his or her own car. Now, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be promoted. And elected officials, whether they be state senators or county commissioners or state representatives or city councilmen and selectmen, they need to work collaboratively in making sure that the policies and programs happen for that to occur, so that it isn't an extra burden for Hypertherm, or it isn't an extra burden for Southwest Community Services, but it's a partnership where all of us are working collaboratively to get it done. That's what needs to happen. And see, that's why we have to get you into the Senate. I mean, to be honest with you, that's why we need people like you and I there that are going to think that way.
Yeah, because see, the thing is that I think in terms of not of a town's public transportation, but of a district public transportation. Right. This has to be a district thing, because there are areas in the district that already have that kind of transportation. The hub of Hanover with the hospital, Lebanon with Hypertherm, that area has public transportation. You can go from Hanover to Lebanon, to West Lebanon, to the hospital, to the shopping center without any problem. But once you move away from that hub, it's gone. We were able to get a public transportation, advanced transit, come to Lyme for 1 year, and then they dropped it. Why? Because it was not profitable. Well, the thing is that if we develop a district plan, then it would make sense. And then it would become public transportation for real, not just public transportation for people who don't have a car or can't get somewhere from there. No, and actually, I think that would have a very positive effect in terms of hiring and retention of people, because the problems with public transportation affect everyone. They affect the towns in the southern part of the state, and they affect the towns in the northern part of the state. And because the prices of real estate are so high in that central hub that has public transportation, the result is that a lot of the people who work in that hub live far away. And that is a clear scenario for a strong system of public transportation district-wide. So I think that we have to go for that. Crystal ball. Yes.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier how, a few years back after 9/11 and after the my stint in the federal government, I was doing a lot of private community development work, and we were doing some work with the town of Derry. And Derry, New Hampshire was telling us how 77% of the community drive away, go out to work every day, most of them into Massachusetts. And, so what they've done is they have not looked at mass transportation. They have not looked at community transportation. They've not looked at alternatives, and they just have these people getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, driving to outside of Boston just to get to work for 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, or 9. I mean, that's crazy. Can you imagine living that kind of existence? We certainly don't want to replicate that here. What we really need to do is to be holistic and look at the big picture. So it has to be broadband, it has to be education, it has to be infrastructure, it has to be a cross-section of issues that need to be legitimately expounded and crafted answers that are very broad in their makeup. One of the things we are doing here in Sullivan County, we came to realize that Route 11 and 103 is one of the most heavily trafficked roads in New Hampshire. People coming up 91 and they're cutting across over to go to the White Mountains, or they're cutting across to go to Lake Winnipesaukee, or in some cases going even as far as the Atlantic Ocean. So it's heavily trafficked area. What we realize is that none of them were stopping here. They were just using us as a pass-through. So we started a whole online technology kind of piece of advertising, things like St. Gaudens. St. Gaudens is the only historic national park in New Hampshire. That's places like the Richards Library and Art Center in Newport, the Fort No. 4, French and Indian recreated fort in Charleston. I mean, so we started looking at that and saying, hey, there are all these tourists. Now, sadly, there aren't any tourists right now, but they will be coming back, and we need to be ready for that. I mean, those are the kinds of creative, I think, broad brush kinds of things that we as a region have to look at.
But I think that change of vision, moving from the short view, town centered, to the long view, district centered, is crucial. I think that it's crucial because I think that all those developments that are going to give us that better future, or a future where we build back better, they all require that kind of cooperation. It's not, if we want to develop in that way, whether it's broadband, whether it's public transportation, whether it's infrastructure, we need to move as a district. We need to move in a concerted and coordinated way. And that I think applies to all the things that we have been discussing. And it also applies to one thing that we haven't been discussing, but that we'll have to talk about, because that, of course, is on everybody's mind. It's been on everybody's mind for a long time, and now it's even more so, and that's healthcare.
Exactly. That's what I was just thinking. Yes.
And access, because we're talking about two issues: affordability and access. So, how do you? What does your vision of the future tell you when it comes to healthcare?
It's already here. I mean, we have one of the best medical centers in the region, in New England. Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center is one of the examples that we should highlight and showcase, right? And they have an entire healthcare network. So much of what they're doing is telemedicine. They're treating and working with people in their homes. Now, if they're living in Lebanon or Hanover or even Claremont, I guess you can do that. But if you're living in Goshen or Leominster or maybe parts of Enfield and Canaan and other parts of Western New Hampshire, you're not going to be able to do telemedicine without broadband, without connectivity. So those are the kinds, that's where they all fit together. That's where everything comes together, and we need to be very inclusive and not own anything, but work as partners. That's I can't say that enough and over and over again.
I really agree with that.
Yeah.
There is also something else that I keep thinking about. I was thinking about the fact that yes, there is that big medical hub with Dartmouth Hitchcock in Lebanon and Hanover, but they just closed that clinic in Charleston, and there is no maternal ward in Sullivan County.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Those are really important deficiencies, and of course we have to address them. But one thing that I think about is that we are, as a country, way too focused on hospitals. Hospitals are very important, but not all healthcare should take place at hospitals. I think that one of the things that we need to do is strengthen a healthcare system that really supports and finances and organizes community-based care and home-based care. I mean, if you have ever dealt with someone who had a long illness, or if you're dealing with older people, they are really in a very precarious situation, because traveling to the central hospital, whether we're talking about Claremont or whether we're talking about Alice Pextay or whether we're talking about Dartmouth Hitchcock, is a journey for a lot of people. We should have a system that provides a better healthcare network in those areas that are removed from those big centers. And many of the ailments and many of the issues that people have can be taken care of outside the hospital. If we did that, if we really strengthen, the visiting nurses program, the community care, the community-based care, and the home-based care, we would really relieve the pressure on the hospital, certainly on the emergency rooms, and we would provide better day-to-day healthcare for our citizens, regardless where they were. So I think that maybe we can expand on two fronts here. We can make sure that the hospitals get the money back that they need from, Medicare reimbursements, and we can also look to expanding that network that would cover. I mean, again, it's the same idea. It's the idea that instead of having isolated communities, and they sort have to fend for themselves. No, you have a plan. You look at the district and you say, you know what? This we do together and we do for the whole district. And that's a different vision of what the district should look like, I think.
Exactly. We're talking about growing a community and expanding and developing a community. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about living, we're talking about lifestyle. And think about this. If you're a young couple and you're considering moving to New Hampshire, Western New Hampshire, District 5, think of the three C's, Cornish, Claremont, and Charlestown, right? If you're thinking of coming here and you're going to have a family and you're going to have children and you're being told, oh, by the way, you're going to have to go over to Vermont to do your, to have your baby and to deal with all of those issues, Now, in reality, that's not that far, and there's nothing wrong with us collaborating with our partners in Vermont and Springfield and Windsor and so forth. But the reality is that, wait a minute, you're not providing that service here as a medical service, and that's not senior citizens. That we're talking about young 30-something, families, parents, and so forth. But as it applies to senior citizens, we have an excellent county nursing home. It's one of the best, I think, in the country, and certainly in New England. But we have this image, of course, those facilities as being remote and out of place, and not meeting the needs. But in reality, they are. However, we have to ensure that they continue to meet the senior population, the aging population, those of us that are baby boomers, and both of us are. So we need to ensure that those facilities do service senior citizens and the elderly, and that they do it in a safe, healthy manner that is respectful of their beings. I mean, that's the key.
I know, and the thing is that we do have to support and enhance the nursing home, the state nursing homes, and the county nursing homes. But we also have to make it possible for people who don't go to a nursing home, choose to live on their own, or choose to live with a relative. We need to make it possible for those people to receive the care they want without having to move to a nursing home, without having to move to an institution.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And we don't always have the personnel. Now, my dad passed away at 94 in 2006, and the last 3 months of his life, he had to go into a nursing home because we just, we physically, the nurses and so forth were saying, you can't do this, you can't meet his needs. So I remember saying to them, look, we had some assets, he had some assets. We were willing to pay someone to come while we were gone to work to come and basically be with him, to, be a companion, to help him go to the bathroom, help him with his lunch and so forth. And he was a rather mobile individual. We couldn't find anyone to do that. That was an occupation that at the time, now I think it's somewhat changed, but there was no one that the state or the Visiting Nurses Association could refer and say, oh yeah, we have a list of people here who've been trained and could do this. I mean, that's just an example of being able to stay and live in your own home. And he wilted away. I mean, here was a 94-year-old man who drove until he was 92. And the last 3 months of his life, he just sort of wilted away in a nursing home. And it broke my heart to go in every day to see him. But that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
I know, and there is two sides to that picture. On the one hand, it is the side of allowing someone like your father to have the kind of life he wants to have.
Yes.
Instead of sending, uprooting him and sending him into a situation where he's going to wilt away. But on the other side, you have the job opportunities. We're always talking about creating jobs. That would create a lot of jobs. And if we brought that together with the proper training schools, we could have a new caregiving force that would strengthen the health system of the state and make the life of our senior citizens a lot better if they decided to choose to stay on their own. So it has that two side effect. But again, this is not something that you do locally in one town. No, this has to be a movement forward. It has to be saying, you know what, we're going to work on this. We're going to collaborate, and we're going to create that system. We're going to create the training programs. We're going to create the certifying programs, and then we're going to have a new labor force that is going to, address those needs that right now are not being addressed. Because if they had been addressed, you would not have had to move your father to the nursing home. And yeah.
Yeah, and in reality, visiting nurses associations, gerontologists, people who are experts in that field, physicians, they all have been working on this and these kinds of ideas for a very long time. There just has not been the emphasis in Concord or the emphasis in Washington or to pay attention to that and to make that happen, to pass legislation that would make those kinds of training programs as incentives and something that somebody would want to pursue, as well as state policy. That's the kind of stuff that needs to happen. And it isn't that we're so smart that we've come up with this. No, we're just smart enough to say, hey, let's listen to the experts and the professionals, and let's help them make that happen. That's the part that is unfortunately not always happening in state government.
Another thing that I think is a silver lining from this crisis, this pandemic, is the fact that there's certain jobs that are now really being valued and recognized, and that have not been valued and recognized in the same way before. And the jobs of caregivers, on that list. I think that with new value comes the opportunity to redefine what those jobs entail and the kind of compensation they receive. Because one of the things that has to change is how caregivers are paid and what their working conditions are. So all that has to be put in place so that we can develop that network that could really have a major impact on the health of our citizens, and also on the job landscape of this country, of this district, because that will provide a lot of jobs. I mean, we're thinking about COVID-19. Just think of training the people we really need to train in order to have the contact tracers and the testing dogs. Where are those people? We need people. Where is that workforce? We need to create that workforce, not just to address COVID-19. We need to have it in place. We need to have a strong network of caregiving and healthcare delivery, much stronger than what we have now. And again, that is not a local thing. That has to be legislated from Concord, and it has to be implemented at least district-wide. That's the way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's so true. That's not me.
That was my
Archer.
I should have unplugged it and I didn't unplug. Well, I don't know. I think that we could. One more thing that I would like to touch on is climate action. And the reason I want to touch on climate action, Ray, is because you know that this is one of my top priorities. And it's one of my top priorities because I believe that unless we address that, all those other wonderful things that we are contemplating in the crystal ball may not help us much. I mean, that's a big, dark cloud in the horizon. And I don't think that we should be distracted from addressing it because we're dealing with the crisis we're dealing with. I think that our goals in clean energy, in renewables, in zero carbon footprint, those are all top priorities for the district and for the state, and certainly for the district. And again, here we're talking about the possibility of creating new jobs associated with some of the steps that we can take to move towards a green economy, because we can create jobs around massive energy efficiency programs. We can create jobs around transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables, and in all those areas. But I really think that this is something that has to be in that looking to the future vision, because it's easy to lose sight of it because there's so many pressing things right now, and they're concrete and they're happening right now. Education, healthcare, infrastructure, broadband, communication. But that is like an overarching reality. It's an emergency, and we cannot, take our eyes off it. We have to move really aggressively and decisively. That's one of the things that we have to do now, as we've done it before. And then, hopefully, some of the best initiatives that the legislature passed this year, House and Senate, that was, climate action legislation, but hopefully we'll bring it back next year and we'll be able to move on it, because those things need to happen, and that has to be, at the forefront of our forward-looking vision for the district and for the state. I think we can't just, put it in the back burner and say, okay, yeah, yes, of course we have to deal with the climate, but right now we have more pressing things to do. We don't have more pressing things to do. That is a very pressing thing to do, and we have to do it as we do everything else, and not postpone it in any way. I mean, I don't know, but that's the way I feel. Of course, that's, for me, it's been a driving force in my activities and my work as a legislator and so on. But I think that it's so for the district. I think that it will only be, good for the district, enhance the economic opportunities, enhance the job opportunities, attract investment to those areas. And I think that we really have to move, in a concerted way to cover all those bases and make it happen together. We really do.
And as you were talking, I'm thinking it affects quality of life. It affects what we here in Western New Hampshire, and certainly in the Southern District, or southern part of District 5, are very rural, very small town. They're hunting, fishing, all of those, hiking, all of those outdoor types of experiences are ingrained into everyone here. And think of that, without climate change, if we continue down the path we're going, then our fish will not be edible. The wild game that these hunters want to go out, and deer and moose and so forth, they will not be edible. I mean, we're going to be killing ourselves. I mean, it's just absurd how short-sighted we as a people are in regards to the impact of climate change on our existence and future.
Look, just a small example, I pick mushrooms. I pick wild mushrooms. I've been picking my wild mushrooms all my life. Do you know how dramatically the crops of wild mushrooms have changed in the last 10 years? I mean, you have no idea. For me, that's like a map of what's happening across the environment. The extent to which certain varieties have just about disappeared, and they've disappeared because of climate change, and that applies to every area. So we definitely cannot, just put that on the back burner. That can never be put on the back burner. We have to move with it as decisively as we have to move with education and with infrastructure, with broadband, with health care and delivery, and all those things. But I think that unless you want to add something, we maybe should give our listeners a chance to say something, because
I think that would be a great idea.
Then if we have some questions, we are ready to take some questions. Let's see if the moderators have questions for us.
Hello. So we do have some questions. The first one is coming to us from YouTube, and it's, what do we do to keep young people in New Hampshire, both by incentivizing them not to leave and by attracting young people and families to come to the state?
Do you want to go, Ray?
Well, I think that's exactly what we've, Gina, I think that's exactly what we've been trying to say, is that the answer has to be a spectrum of programs and issues, and it has to look at the whole gamut, whether it be healthcare and education, whether it be job training, whether it be internet, it has to look at the whole spectrum of impact, because and I'm not sure if that's the right term, but I think what we've been saying all the past 15-20 minutes is that that's the only way it's going to be successful in attracting and bringing in new young people and keeping young people here.
I mean,
I missed her.
I mean, we'll be able to keep them here if we give them the education and the training they need, And if we provide a working environment where they can get the jobs that they need in order to have productive and happy and prosperous lives. So those two things have to come together. And one big piece of the puzzle is, of course, the issue of the cost of college. I think that we spoke about it when we talked about education, but I think that that is a very important factor. The cost of college should be affordable to our young people, and it should offer training that they can then use to find jobs in local areas without having to be displaced outside the state or to the same areas of the state we discussed before, the southwestern areas of the state. So we need to really, revitalize the job market and the economy locally in our area so that we can keep our young people in this area, not just in the state, but in this area.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, I have another question, education related as well. This one's from YouTube. My son attends Lebanon Middle School and started learning computer programming as early as 5th grade. How do we make sure that all the kids have the support they need at home to succeed?
Well, technologically, it's broadband. We need to make sure that every child in the state has access to all the information and the educational tools that you can get if you have high-speed internet and that you cannot get if you don't have high-speed internet. It starts right there. In addition to that, you're talking about the parents, being supportive of that kind of activity and working closely with the children and with the schools to maximize the opportunities that come with those tools. And that takes us right back to school funding and to the need, the absolute and pressing need to come up with a funding mechanism that ensures equitable high quality education and opportunities for every child in the region and in the state, not just for Lebanon or for Hanover, but for everyone.
And it also requires leadership. And that's something that we haven't had. It requires somebody who's not just going to mandate, thou shalt do this, Lebanon School or Claremont School District. No, it requires leadership, that somebody's going to come in and create answers and problem solve with the locals, But we haven't had that state or national leadership in regards to education and educational development for many, many years. Certainly for the past 3, they've not been around at all. So I think that's another key that has to occur, is some real leadership that is going to step up to the plate and say, hey, how can we collaborate and how can we cooperatively develop answers in regards to training kids for the 21st, soon to be 22nd century.
That's right. So you need people who can think creatively and out of the box. And that takes us right back to the beginning when we were talking about tools to develop a utopian vision and a crystal ball. That's what we're talking about. And there's specific, this is not a fantasy. We're talking about specific issues. We're talking about specific tools. And we're talking about ways in which those tools can be brought to bear to transform the future. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we must do right now, because this is a real opportunity to transform the future. And we can do it. There's no question in my mind that we can.
Absolutely. All right. The next question comes to us from Facebook, and it's speaking about community. Many are talking about the Pleasant Street revitalization project in Claremont. Do you support it?
Well, I think the concept is a great idea. We have these old 19th century mill towns all over New England, all over New Hampshire, that are not able to compete mercantile retail, with the Amazons and the big, huge corporations. And what we need to do is to rethink, how do we make these communities central to to each town and each community. I think if you look at Lebanon, for example, they have that big traffic circle, and they have that little area that they've closed off, the street that they closed off that used to go through, and the Salt Hill is on the left, and then there's another restaurant across the way, and there's a walkway, and people, that's become a community again. People can go there. And I think, I'm not sure about the particulars of the Claremont plan. I don't want to lock myself into saying, yes, I approve every single aspect, but I think the concept of starting the discussion and talking about how do we make these niche stores competitive with these huge, corporate entities that exist, that will end up making the community of Claremont more attractive. Yes, I support that.
It's interesting because this is happening in Claremont now, and it's great. But it's more than a local Claremont phenomenon. It's more than a district phenomenon. It's more than a state phenomenon. It's happening everywhere. It's happening in Europe as well. In Europe, you have the same issue. You have the issue of how to create hubs within cities and within towns that will keep that kind of close-knit community life, and that close-knit business community alive, in the face of the extreme power that those big corporations have, and that has resulted in the bookstores closing, the grocery stores closing, and so on. And it's always done in small quantities, but the experiment seems to work every single time. And it seems to create that reality where people actually walk the streets and they buy locally, and they have the little market that opens on certain days during the week. And all that has the effect of revitalizing the local economy. And when you tie that to other programs like the local food programs for restaurants, for instance, again, that connects that part of the city or of the town that you're revitalizing with the farmers and the people who are not even living in that part. And I think that is, again, it's a path to growth, and it's a path to community growth. And community growth is important because one of the things that happened with the monsters like Amazon is that they, little by little, they rob us of our sense of community, the sense of community that came from going to the bookstore, from going then after to the bookstore, going to the record shop and buying things in different places with different people in local businesses that we knew about. So it's really worth the effort, and I think that we really have to work, towards that kind of recovery, that kind of redefinition of those areas. I think it'd be good for everyone. We have to do it the right way, but it's a good project.
One of the last thoughts I have on this whole topic right now is that, the present state senator is Martha Hennessy, who, by the way, has endorsed Beatriz. But she's a Hanover woman and grew up in Hanover. And she was telling me how when she ran for her first time, how Claremont was always the special place for her as a kid growing up. Claremont was the place that you went to if you lived in Hanover, or if you lived in any of the communities within that 25-mile radius. That's where you came to buy your dresses. That's where you came to buy your suits, your clothes. That's where you went out, and that was the stylish place to be. Now that's hard to imagine today that is the image of Claremont of just maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. And that, I think, is what this plan, we're talking about crystal balls. I think that's what this plan is really about, is how do we make Claremont an attractive, better place to be as a community? That's
right. As a community, this notion of recovering that sense of community. Yeah, I think that it's good to develop projects in that direction. Yeah.
So whether the sidewalks are 8 feet wide or 7.5 feet wide, that's open for discussion. But I like the concept of talking about it.
I agree. The concept is really good.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I have a question from Facebook. You mentioned creating jobs in the local area. What are we going to do about the major devastation to small businesses in the area that is only going to get worse this winter?
Well, that is that's a tough question, Maura. That's not easy. First of all, I think we started out by talking about the Joe Biden plan, and it's an excellent plan, and it's very substantive. However, the reality is that we are now faced in we're not in a recession, we're in a depression. We're in very serious times, and it is not going to be easy. This winter is going to be a hard winter, so I don't want to. We're talking about crystal balls. I don't want to sugarcoat this. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, and what we need to do is to put our heads together and think about what can we come up with short-term plans and measures that are going to aid and assist people to get through this winter. How are we going to provide real financial and support to small businesses, the ones that you're talking about that are going to be affected? How do we help them stay afloat and keep limping along, hopefully, so that when things get better, they will be able to survive? Yeah, that is, I think, the kind of planning and leadership that needs to happen. And I'm hoping that we on a regional level and on a state level and on a national level will start looking at it that way, because even if worst case scenario is going to be hard, it's not going to be an easy answer. I hope I helped answer that question. I was just saying to them, Beatriz, that if this is going to be under the best of situations, this is going to be a very hard winter, and what we need to do is come up with government programs and government assistance that's really going to help small business and to aid and assist them into maintaining their companies and their establishments.
Yep. I mean, I heard you. I stepped out because I had a dog emergency.
I heard, yes.
But I could hear you from right outside the window. And yes, I completely agree with you. I think that it's going to require, as you say, thinking creatively, but it's also going to require real support, and I mean economic support. Those relief packages have to be negotiated. Those relief packages have to get to where they're supposed to get, because people are going to need, support to weather this particular storm and land on their feet on the other side, one way or the other. So I think that that's going to require a really tight and honest partnership between local, state, and federal. But it's going to have to work that way.
Absolutely. All right, so I think we'll take about one more question because, we're getting on towards 7:30. And so the question is from our YouTube viewers, and it's, is there a way to bring green energy manufacturing jobs into the area? How do we get to 100% renewable energy so we don't end up in a climate dystopia?
Well, there are very specific plans for that. I mean, we have, and I've said that before, we have a number of really good tools to get to 100 renewable energy. We have the tools. We have to be able to use them and apply them. And it's not at all unrealistic to think that we're going to get to 100% renewable energy in the near future. And one thing that has to be emphasized over and over again is that the transition to renewable energies has the potential, and it has been demonstrated to create an incredible number of jobs. I mean, Biden talks about 100 million jobs, but we don't have to think about 100 million jobs in Sullivan County and in District 5. But we certainly have to look around and see what's happening in areas that have implemented aggressive agendas of carbon reduction and transition to renewables, and we see that those areas prosper and that those areas have good new jobs. And that's exactly what we want to do. The notion that transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables is a hit on the job market. That is not an accurate notion, and it's a notion that is of course perpetuated by the fossil fuel producers. But in practice, in areas that have moved aggressively towards clean energy, renewable energy, and low carbon footprint, the job market has been able to create, a lot of very new jobs. So I think that we don't need to think about any dystopia. I think that we should be back to utopia, in the sense that, we think forward and we think creatively and out of the box, and we have enough tools, and we develop more that will allow us to get where we need to get, and in the time frame that we need to work with. There is no question about it. I mean, every projection, every study shows that, and I believe it, and I think we all have to work towards it because it is feasible.
And see, I think that's why we have to elect Beatriz to the state Senate, because that's the kind of thinking that we need down there. And that we need people that are going to be able to put those kinds of thoughts into real substantive legislation.
Yeah, we do. It has to be done. It is an emergency, and the time is now. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it is just after 7:30, but I think we might have time for just one quick follow-up question. Again from Facebook. Do you think we could do something like Governor Phil Scott's $150 spend local plan? Is that a good idea? And that's a plan that gave everyone in every Vermont household $150 to spend as part of a local campaign to spur economic activity. So is that something that you would support in New Hampshire?
I'm very skeptical of those, one-time payment type of things. I think that they're not the best way to deal with the real situations that people face. I think that it looks good, but it doesn't really go a long way in terms of solving people's problems. So I think that we have to think more creatively and more responsibly, and with a more long-term vision. I don't know what you think, Ray.
Yeah, I really, I'm not that familiar with Governor Scott's local plan, so I'm sorry, I can't, I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a comment.
So, I mean, $150 doesn't go a long way. Let me give you another example. There's been all over the papers that big brouhaha about the fact that out of the more than $1 billion that Sununu got from the CARE Act, he's putting up first $40 million and then 60 more. And today in the paper, it looked like he was going to put in some more. You know what that is? That's a drop in the bucket. You need much more than that. That is good for promotion. It's good for Sununu because it makes him look good and he's on top of things. But in fact, it doesn't accomplish what we need to accomplish in terms of broadband expansion. My skepticism about programs like the $150 comes from that, because I don't see those programs being successful at really addressing the needs, the present and the long-term needs of the people that they target. So I think we have to do better than that.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening, the moderators for asking the question, and especially Ray for joining us for that conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's been wonderful having you all, and I wish you a very nice evening.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Same here. Dios.